Hello everybody and welcome to the final episode of Halloween Spooktacular here on the Thrill Seekers, and today we are doing a recap of Halloween Horror Nights 29. The 2019 version of Halloween Horror Nights was quite awesome. Honestly, it was one of the best years I've been to. Universal did a really good job of incorporating IPs that all kind of fit together with that 80s aesthetic they were going for. The houses were fun. Were they scary? Not really, but they were fun. They had some great source material to work with. They were creative. They were pretty impressive and had a lot of personality. There are two shows. Once again, finally, after losing Bill and Ted, we finally got a second show, and it's a show I think will be around for a long time, or at least I hope so, as well as Academy of Villains, of course. We got some fun scare zones. It was a cool year, but rather than just saying it was a cool year, let me break down my rankings for the shows, the scare zones, and the houses. So I'm going to rank all three categories, every single thing there with one exception. We're going to start off with the category everybody, of course, wants to see and hear, and that is the houses. Now, I will tell you, I was not able to experience the House of a Thousand Corpses house. I went to Halloween Horror Nights 4 times this year, which is a personal record for a single year. Every time I went, that house always had a crazy long line in the back of the park, and I was always there at the wrong place at the wrong time. Because of that, I had to make sacrifices. On the last night of Horror Nights, I really wanted to hit up that house so that I could complete the gauntlet. Didn't have the time. So that was the house that I did not get to experience this year, which is only one house. That's pretty good. I literally did everything else though. So let's go down the house rankings and determine which ones I think were the best. We're going to start off with the 9th ranked house, and that of course is Depths of Fear. So I only did this house on the final night of the event, and it was an interesting concept. The whole, you're being sent into this underwater base where everything that could go wrong did go wrong, was very aliens-y, but set in underwater, which I thought was cool. It was an interesting premise, and I also like the fact that you don't get out alive. If you watch the Q&A session with some of the creators of Halloween Horror Nights, one thing they mentioned about this house is the fact that you don't make it. You die at the end of the house. There's a countdown that's always going on, and the countdown ends when you get out of the house. So, like, you die. Not many haunted houses that could say, oh, you died at the end. Cool. Interesting concept. The main thing that I thought brought this house down was the quality of the costuming and the variety of characters. So pretty much you got kelp-faced human, a couple fish dudes that looked really funky, and then like a couple heroic people who were trying to get you to safety or that you were rescuing. It was very bland. Not a lot of variety, not a lot of interesting things to look at, and the scares were not anything impressive. The set design was great, concept was unique. It was an interesting idea for an original house, but I thought out of all the houses that we have this year, it was the weakest. Number 8 is going to Nightingale's Blood Pit. Now this one caught my attention as soon as it was announced because it's based on Roman gladiators. I'm a big fan of Roman mythology, Roman history. Roman's a very fascinating subject. Gladiators are really cool. You have basically slaves or captured people who are thrown into the arena to kick butt, kill each other. Very brutal, but pretty cool concept. To turn into a haunted house, basically what they did was you were underneath the gladiator arena, and then there were these creatures called the Nightingales, which feasted upon the flesh of the gladiators who passed away. It was basically a crossover between an old house, which they had a house called Nightingales before, and then arena, like gladiatory combat. Interesting concept. Again, Universal was definitely thinking outside the box when it came to its original houses this year, and I'm all for that. I love the ideas that they're coming up with. Again, I thought this one was kind of meh in terms of the quality. The set design was not super original. There were some cool things, but because you were underneath The arena, you didn't see a whole lot of like super cool Roman mythology and architecture kind of stuff. You saw some, not a ton. In terms of the scares, there weren't much there. It was most like, I would say it caught me off guard a few times. In terms of scares, I do say Nightingale was one of the stronger ones in terms of like actually terrifying people. It was very loud, had a weird smell because it was supposed to smell like blood because you're underneath the arena. The variety of characters, not a whole lot. It was pretty standard, and you just saw the Nightingales a lot. You saw a lion at one point. It was interesting. Not my favorite house. Not a bad house though, so we're checking out. Number 7 is going to be Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I'm going to throw this under the category of I've not seen the movie, so I don't appreciate this house as much as people who are fans of the movie. However, it was an interesting house. It basically wasn't a haunted house, it was a fun house. You go through, it's very colorful. Nothing in there was particularly scary. You have these weird looking clowns that pop out at you. There are those cotton candy cocoons. There were some interesting gags. It was more funny than scary. That being said, I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's not really a haunted house. It's more so a fun house that you can kind of wander through and relive some moments from the movie. I enjoyed it. It was pretty cool, but not my favorite. So it's number 7 out of the 9 that I've done. Number 6 is Yeti. This one I thought was interesting because, again, Universal thinking really outside the box when it comes to original concepts for haunted houses. Doing a house based on the Yeti? That's different. Never seen them do that before. This house was cool. There was snow effect. It was pretty wet for the most part because like you were walking through the ice. It was cold. It was a very cold house. The Yeti scares were quite good, actually. I mean, you have these giant hulking dudes as the Yetis. They definitely would catch you off guard. You had some of those like guys trying to escape the Yetis. It was pretty brutal. The set design was great. The concept was really good. I might sound pretentious for saying that the enemy variety or the scarer varieties were a little bland. It was all Yetis. Now granted, a Yeti is cool, but it was a lot of the same Yeti. So interesting idea. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good house. Again, not my favorite, but it's kind of middle of the pack. Number 5 is going to be Graveyard Games. Now this one, a lot of people say is their favorite house of the year. I liked it. It was a nice twist on the whole graveyard concept. They had this whole backstory about these kids who played in the graveyard and the ghosts were fine with them. But then these douchey teenagers go in and graffiti everything. And then the spirits of the graveyard seek their revenge. Interesting concept. I like the whole social media feed that they played on the outside of the house. That was pretty cool. There was some pretty interesting technology in use in that house. It was pretty cool, but again, it's a graveyard house. It got a little repetitive in terms of the set design. It was good, like don't get me wrong, it was a pretty impressive set, but it got a little stale after a while. Just going through and it's like, oh, another graveyard, oh, there's a ghost, another graveyard, another ghost, it gets repetitive. It was good though. I enjoyed it, and I think of the original concept houses, that was the strongest one because it had an interesting backstory and it did a good twist on a classic Halloween staple, which is of course the graveyard. So I liked it for what it was. Again, not my favorite house. I was only able to do that one once, and you'll see as the list goes on, the ones that I liked, I did more than once. I didn't spend as much time as I would like during some of my trips to Horror Nights this year, but I was able to get a few houses in most nights. So that's good. Number 4 goes to Stranger Things. Now I know what you're thinking. Stranger Things last year was my second favorite house, so why is this one dropped as low as it has? First of all, I actually had pretty low expectations for Stranger Things this year, mostly because it was going to be primarily based around season 2 of the show. Season 2 was kind of a slog to get through as someone who enjoys Stranger Things. Loved season 1 to death. Terrific season. Great start to the show. Season 2 is where things started to go kind of off the rails. It was getting repetitive. They spent so much time in underground tunnels and in facilities. Like the locations were not interesting at all in the season. It just wasn't my favorite in terms of the aesthetic, in terms of the concept for the show. I think that it kind of went downhill after that. But season 3 redeemed it. Season 3 is about as good as season 2, I think. And we did have a little bit of season 3 at the end of the house, which those moments were honestly some of the best of the house. I thought the season 2 bits were better than I expected, but again, I wasn't expecting much. The season 3 bits, especially with the mind flare at the very end and the Starcourt Mall scene, that was awesome. There was some really good special effects in play. Again, this is one of those houses where it was not scary. It's mostly meant for those who are a big fan of the show and they want to walk through some of their favorite moments. And it definitely accomplished that goal. So I enjoyed the house a lot. I really hope Universal brings back Stranger Things probably just one more year. I don't want it to go into Walking Dead territory where they bring it back every single year. But like, I want them to bring it back one more year to give season 3 a proper house, because the bits and pieces that they had of season 3 were good, but they had to piece it together from early script concepts because the house was well in development before season 3 came out. They actually mentioned that in the Q&A session video as well. So I want to see them do a proper season 3 of Stranger Things as a house. Honestly, just do a compilation. Do bits and pieces from each season, and then maybe a little teaser for season 4 at the end. I think that would be a really cool way to kind of send off Stranger Things as a Halloween Horror Nights concept. So I would love to see that be one of the houses for Halloween Horror Nights 30. But as a Halloween Horror Nights 29 house, I thought it was solid. It's a very good house. Not my favorite. I was only able to do it once because the wait times were ridiculous for that house. But it was good. I enjoyed it. Number 3 goes to Jordan Peele's Us. Now this one is a very interesting revelation. Again, Us went into the category of I've not seen the movie, so I didn't appreciate the house as much the first couple times I did it. But first time I went through the house, I was very intrigued by the atmosphere, by what was going on. So much, in fact, that I went through the house again on the second time I went to Halloween Horror Nights. Because I thought the house was so interesting, I watched the movie. That's never happened. There have been a couple times where I go through a house and I actually want to watch the movie. I've never actually done it. This was the first time that I've watched a movie based on a Halloween Horror Nights house experience. So good job, Jordan Peele and Us, for the house being creepy. Now that I've seen the movie, and of course I didn't get a chance to go through the house again after I saw the movie, but the house was great. It really encapsulated the creepy atmosphere of the film. Of course, the beginning of the film takes place in the 80s, which is why it ties together with the Halloween Horror Nights aesthetic. It was really well done. It was creepy. It was interesting. And again, they did something different in terms of how a haunted house is perceived, because as they mentioned again in that Q&A session, which if you have not watched those Q&A videos about Halloween Horror Nights, you really should. They're really interesting. And I kept going back to them as I went through these houses just to kind of refresh myself. Definitely watch those. It's great, especially if you're a big fan of Halloween Horror Nights like I am. The fact that you are a casual observer in that house and not the center of attention, I thought was the thing that was the most interesting. Because, you know, again, with most haunted houses, you have things that chase you or pop out at you or try to scare you. With Us, things were going on around you, but no one was specifically targeting you as a person. They were targeting everybody else. And I thought that was really clever, a very smart way to handle that property, and it worked really well. So hats off to Us for being way more impressive than I expected it to be as a Halloween Horror Nights house. Good job. And also, hats off to the film for being a really good film, and one that I would normally not expect I would like, but I ended up liking a lot. So, yay. Now, the top two, very, very close. Maybe not as close as last year. Actually, no, these are closer, because last year, Poltergeist was by far the best house. These two are pretty close. Number 2 is Universal Monsters. Now, this house I've really enjoyed. It was the classic Universal monsters. So the Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula, the creature from the Black Lagoon. They dug up some monsters I did not expect to see. Like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Phantom of the Opera. that brought them all back. They modernized their look to make them genuinely creepy, put a lot of thought and detail into crafting the worlds that these characters were in, and came up with some pretty creative scares. Both times I went through this house, I was really impressed by it. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed going through it every time, and I always noticed little details each time I went through that house. So, considering the Universal monsters really don't get enough attention, hopefully they will, and especially with the rumor of the Universal Monsters Land coming to Epic Universe, opening in 2023. I'm glad that they put all this thought and love into the Universal Monsters house. It was an outstanding house. Easily one of the better houses that Universal's done in the last few years, and definitely the best classic Monsters house I've ever seen. Hats off to Universal Creative for that. Number 1, what else could it be? Ghostbusters. I love Ghostbusters as a film. I love Ghostbusters as a property. The house felt like a walk through dark ride in all the best ways. From going through the library, seeing all the ghosts fly by, some really nice Pepper's ghost effect, which I thought was awesome, as well as some well-used projection screens. Going through the firehouse, seeing Janine there. Walking through the alleyway, seeing all these different ghosts, seeing Slimer, all the different quotes, all the dialogue, all these really impressive looking sets. The whole scene of the Keymaster with the Rick Moranis lookalike popping up as a kind of a jump scare. I thought that was really clever. That, like, every time I walked by that, I wanted to spend more time just observing that set. It was really impressive. And of course, the State Park Marshmallow Man at the end was really cool. And of course, the best end of any house this year, when you walk right in and you see Bill Murray's character pop up and go, "We came, we saw, we kicked its ass." That was great. So, Ghostbusters was by far my favorite house of the year. The Halloween Horror Nights 29 champion, Ghostbusters. Thank you, Universal, for finally giving us the Ghostbusters house that we've always wanted. It was great. I would love to see other properties of a similar vein, like creepy kind of comedy style films, get more love. One that's been getting a lot of attention lately, and I think would be a perfect Halloween Horror Nights house, Beetlejuice. Make that happen, Universal. That would be awesome. Also, give us Ghostbusters 2. I'd be all for it, or based on the new movie that's coming out next year. Anyway, that's my house review. Now let's get into the scare zones. So I did all 5 scare zones. I thought the scare zones overall were kind of a mixed bag. I didn't love any of them. I liked some more than others, but there wasn't a single scare zone that I was like, oh man, this scare zone's amazing. I could just keep walking through there over and over again. Some were better than others, but I feel some work needs to be done on the scare zones, make them a little better. I think past years they did a little bit more atmospheric looks, and this year was decent, but not incredible. So ranking the scare zones, number 5 is going to be Vanity Ball. Now this one, probably a controversial pick for the bottom scare zone. Granted, I'm not really big in the fashion model kind of thing. The scare zone was interesting, at least. They had little mini stages where, like, little shows with people getting, like, their face ripped off and, like, plastic surgery performed on them. That was interesting. And then, of course, they had the little runway show. There's a lot going on, and there was a lot of kinetic energy in that scare zone, but there was nothing that really, like, wanted me to stay there. It was one of those, like, oh, stand there for a couple seconds, watch something happen. All right, I'm good, and just walk out. I think they were trying to go for a similar thing that they had with Vamp 3 years ago, I think, Vamp 55. Didn't quite work. Even Chucky, the Chucky scare zone I thought was really good because you could literally just stand in there for hours and listen to Chucky trash people. This one was not as interactive, not as interesting, and the setting was kind of meh, so not my favorite scare zone. Not horrible, but not my favorite. Number 4, an arcade. Now this one, I had mixed reactions to putting it at 4. I thought as an eye catcher, this was one of the best eye-catching entrance scare zones that Universal's ever done. It really encapsulated the 1980s video game kind of aesthetic that they were going for. The giant arcade cabinets, the neon, all the characters wearing neon, the chainsaw hordes wearing neon. I thought that was cool. It was a great look, some great photo ops, and great photos were to be had in that scare zone. It wasn't scary in any way, shape, or form. Usually I would walk past through that scare zone, just take a look at things. No one ever really tried to scare me. It was cool to look at, but there wasn't much to it. And also really short. It wasn't even as long as that scare zone area normally is. So it was all right. It was a pretty scare zone, and I do hope that in the future Universal tries to use more really eye-catching elements like the neon for the future. Maybe next year they'll do something similar, maybe a little bit better. Who knows? So an arcade, cool idea. The set work was nice. It needed more substance. Number 3 was Vikings Undead. Now, this one disappointed me a lot, mostly because that scare zone is in the prime scare zone location of Central Park. That walkway going over to Kids Zone has always been one of the best locations for a scare zone. It's covered. You always have the light scattered. There's plenty of room for fog. It's usually very dark, very creepy. Lots of places for people to pop out and spook you. The Viking scare zone, I thought, really underutilized it. It was very dark. The lighting wasn't even that great. And the whole concept, I mean, I liked the idea of Vikings, and they were actually very historically accurate in terms of some of the atrocities that Vikings would actually commit. So I thought that was cool, but it was lacking. Again, I thought, the Vikings, they were zombies, basically. And we've seen zombies so many times at Horror Nights at this point. Like, I'm kind of zombied out. It was alright. I thought they underutilized that space because that's normally one of the best locations for a scare zone, and this one just kind of didn't quite hit the mark. Especially when you compare it to ones like Trick or Treat, which was one of the best uses of that walkway. I thought that was an excellent scare zone. And even the one from last year with all the pumpkin heads, that one was really good too. So like they've used that scare zone area a lot better in the past. This one was kind of meh. Number 2, Zombieland. So, I'm a big fan of the film. Sadly enough, I've not seen Double Tap because it came out at a bad time where I was on vacation and then I came back and it was a whole deal. I love Zombieland. It's a great film. Very funny. Very great comedy. The scare zone, of course, took the same location that Vamp 85 did last year, which was all of the New York Street. Very big scare zone. It was very generic. There were a lot of little in things that I appreciated as a fan of Zombieland. We had vehicles. We had certain characters from the first film that I recognized walking around. One of my favorite things to spot was you had a guy pretending to be zombie Bill Murray. So he acted like a normal human, and then when a zombie walked by, he pretended to be a zombie. I thought that was funny. The zombies, I mean, they didn't really do much. They were zombies, pretty generic. I did appreciate the Zombie Kill of the Week show, little mini show. It was kind of a stunt show on top of the drop tower. That was pretty cool. I liked that concept, but again, I don't think it was nearly as good as the Vamp 85 countdown to New Year's Eve. That was way more exciting. That really brought people in. Like, people would stay in that scare zone for hours last year because of Vamp 85. This one, like, you would walk through it. It's kind of cool. You maybe stop and look at some of the vehicles. The coolest vehicle was the hero limo car from Double Tap, which that was pretty cool that was actually in the scare zone. And we know that was the actual hero car because they kind of made it that big deal. And plus they had, like, all the other vehicles, they didn't have anybody really guarding them. That vehicle was always guarded. There was always at least 1 or 2 Universal team members around that. So I definitely think that was the actual hero car, which that's cool that they actually got permission to use that from Sony. Great film. Great idea for a scare zone. I would much rather see Zombieland as a house, to be honest. I think they could do a lot more with the concept, recreate some of the most impressive scenes from the film. As a scare zone, it was kind of generic, but I did appreciate all the in-jokes, and I appreciated some of the set work and the vehicles that were around. So, not bad. The best scare zone by far, and this one really surprised me, because if you asked me before Halloween Horror Nights started what I thought my favorite scare zone was going to be, this one was probably at the bottom of the list. Rob Zombie Hellbilly Deluxe, located in front of Fast and Furious Supercharged. That scare zone was great. I enjoyed it a lot. It was fun. The energy was really high. You always had something going on, whether it was little mini shows, different characters, and there were some really weird characters walking around. You had the little dancers in the towers. There was some good photo op opportunities. There was, of course, pumping rock music because it's Rob Zombie. It was good. Like, I honestly enjoyed walking through that scare zone every time. I did it 3 or 4 times on the last 2 days because, again, it's a fun scare zone. There's a lot going on. It has some good kinetic energy. So that was my favorite scare zone, pretty easily. I expected a lot more from the scare zone lineup this year, and it just kind of disappointed. So, Hellbilly Deluxe, the champion of scare zones. Now, for shows, there's only 2 shows, and it was a pretty easy decision when it came to ranking them. Number 2 is Academy of Villains Altered States. I fairly recently got into the Academy of Villains hype train. I did not watch them their first couple years. I did watch them 2 years ago. That was the first time I saw it, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty cool dance troupe. They had some cool special effects and dance moves, but it wasn't something I'm like, oh man, I need a full sit-down theater experience to watch this dance troupe. And last year's show, Cyberpunk, really didn't do much for me. They took the sacred former home of Bill and Ted, which was, of course, the Fear Factor Theater, and kind of wasted it. The show just really wasn't designed for a theater. Like, it's much more interesting because they were trying to get people all excited and amped up. It's much better on a smaller stage in the middle of the crowd rather than having everybody seated in an amphitheater, because everyone's tired. They have benches. They're going to sit. They're going to relax. They don't want to stand up and get all amped up. They want to just enjoy themselves. And I feel the show last year just didn't quite mesh as well with the theater setting. This year was much better. Altered States had kind of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of feel. They also brought back some fan favorite performers. It had more of a horror vibe than Cyberpunk, and I thought overall it was a solid show. I enjoyed it. I only did it once, and once was more than enough. But I'm glad I did it, and I did enjoy what I saw of the show, which I saw the whole show, so it's fine. It was a good show, but again, I would much rather have our 2 most excellent dudes return for Halloween Horror Nights 30, and there's a rumor that might happen. So, fingers crossed, Bill and Ted comes back. But keep Academy of Villains. Honestly, Academy of Villains should remain. Put them on the small stage again, right across from the horror makeup show. I thought that setup worked really well. Plus, like, this year there was really nothing over there. It was just kind of a blank area. So why not put them back there, add an additional offering for people who want to enjoy a show in addition to all their mazes. That sounds good to me. Best show, the Marathon of Mayhem. Now, if you don't know what this is, it uses the Universal Cinematic Spectacular water features and projection mapping. Basically, it's Universal's answer to World of Color, which sadly we do not have in Florida in any way, shape, or form. Even though Disney should definitely bring a very similar show to Florida in some way, shape, or form, they haven't yet. No idea why. This is the next best thing. It uses underwater fountains. It uses all kinds of cool projectors. The projection mapping is cool. It uses water screens. It was really impressive. The theming was great. It tied in perfectly to the 80s aesthetic of Halloween Horror Nights, and of course it showcased the Universal Monsters, Killer Clowns, Ghostbusters, and Stranger Things. So it incorporated all of these big IPs that they brought in this year into one show, and it worked really well. If you've not seen the video of the Marathon of Mayhem, be sure to check it out elsewhere on our channel. Of course, I have both the shows and all the Scare Zone walkthroughs. Couldn't get any house videos because Florida. But check all that out if you have not seen it. So, Marathon of Mayhem wins Best Show of Halloween Horror Nights. So overall, I thought Halloween Horror Nights 29 was a great year. I love that they tied everything together with this 80s aesthetic. It worked really well. The food offerings were actually quite solid. If you want to see a few of those, check out our 3-part series on the Big C TV channel for Taste Test Adventures, where I tried out a whole bunch of Halloween Horror Nights food. Pretty good. Now what? Halloween Horror Nights 29 is over. The hat is off. We are done with spooky season. It is now time for Christmas. Or we could just count down to Halloween Horror Nights 30 next year. I can do probably a whole video on what I hope and what I kind of expect for Halloween Horror Nights 30, and I might do that later. But let's just say I think next year is going to be a pretty exciting year for Halloween Horror Nights. So we'll keep our eyes posted. That's going to do it for tonight's recap of Halloween Horror Nights 29 and the end of Halloween Spooktacular 2019. I know it's been an awesome event. I hope everybody has enjoyed everything that we've brought forward. We've got some more stuff coming, including possibly an announcement soon about our holiday event. You'll see about that later. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Thrill Seekers Theme Park Chats.